9,000 crimes per 100,000 residents. Let me put that in perspective for you. Detroit, one of America's most dangerous cities, sits at 2,000. Chicago, around 3,000. Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles quadruples Detroit's crime rate, and that's just what gets reported. We're talking about 50 square blocks in the heart of one of the richest cities on Earth, 2.71 square kilometers, 78,000 people living in tents, under tarps, and cardboard boxes. To give you a sense of the density, this area packs 4 times the population density of Manhattan. Except nobody here has an apartment. They have shopping carts. 5 people die here every single day, not once in a while. Daily. That's 1,825 deaths per year in an area smaller than most college campuses. The life expectancy in Skid Row is 48 years. The national average is 78. People living in this neighborhood lose 3 decades of life just by being there. The exact boundaries run from 3rd Street to 7th Street between Alameda and Main. If you pulled up Google Maps right now, you'd see it sits literally 15 minutes walking from corporate skyscrapers worth billions. The contrast isn't just shocking, it's obscene. You can stand on one corner and see the glass towers of downtown's financial district. Turn around and you're looking at what the United Nations would classify as a humanitarian crisis zone if it existed in a developing country. And here's the thing about those 9,000 crimes. They represent only what actually gets reported. Estimates suggest 60% of crimes in Skid Row never make it to official statistics. Sexual assaults, robberies between residents, assaults. When you're living on the street with no address, no phone, no trust in police, you don't report much. So that 9,000 figure, multiply it by 2.5 to get closer to reality. We're potentially looking at 22,000 crimes annually in 50 blocks. 300 people die from fentanyl overdoses here annually. That's nearly 1 person per day, just from one drug. The pills are pressed to look like prescription medication, Percocet, Xanax, but they're pure fentanyl. 2 milligrams can kill you. That's the equivalent of a few grains of salt. People take what they think is a painkiller, and they're dead in minutes. 1 in 4 women reports being sexually assaulted within the last year. Think about that statistic. 25%. And those are just the ones willing to report it. The actual number is almost certainly higher. There are areas of Skid Row where women won't go alone, even during the day. Tents in certain sections are known as danger zones. Diseases that were essentially eliminated in developed countries are making comebacks in Skid Row. Typhus, hepatitis A, tuberculosis. There have been outbreaks of medieval-era illnesses in downtown Los Angeles in the 21st century. In 2017, there was a hepatitis A outbreak that infected over 600 people. The city had to power wash the streets with bleach. Typhus cases linked to Skid Row reached levels not seen since World War II. 67% of Skid Row residents have diagnosed mental health conditions that go completely untreated. No medication, no therapy, no support. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, PTSD. People experiencing psychotic episodes just wander the streets. The mental health infrastructure that used to exist was dismantled decades ago, and nothing replaced it. Los Angeles spends over $1 billion annually on homelessness. $1 billion. And the population keeps growing. The numbers don't lie. In 2015, LA had 26,000 homeless people. By 2025, it's over 78,000. That's a 300% increase in a decade, while spending increased exponentially. The money is going somewhere, but it's not solving the problem. The city has the 5th largest economy in the world if it were its own country. Greater Los Angeles generates over $1 trillion in GDP annually. Yet this exists. The wealth is there. The resources are there. What's missing is the political will to actually address it. Beverly Hills is 20 minutes away by car. $50 million mansions versus $0 tents. The wealth gap isn't metaphorical here. It's geographical. You can literally see it from one neighborhood to the next. Rodeo Drive, where people spend $10,000 on a handbag, is a short drive from people who haven't showered in months. California has 50% of America's entire homeless population. One state. Half the country's unsheltered people. And Skid Row is the epicenter of that crisis. It's become a magnet. Not because people want to be there, but because it's one of the few places where you won't immediately be arrested for being homeless. But numbers only tell part of the story. Statistics don't explain how this happened. They don't show you why one of the wealthiest regions on the planet allows this to exist. They don't reveal the deliberate policy decisions that created what you're about to learn was an intentionally designed containment zone. Because here's what most people don't know. Skid Row wasn't an accident. It wasn't the natural result of economic forces or unfortunate circumstances. It was created, deliberately, by a specific policy decision made 50 years ago that turned a poor neighborhood into a human warehouse. And understanding how it was built explains exactly why it's so damn hard to dismantle. Skid Row started in the 1870s. The term Skid Row actually comes from Seattle, where loggers would skid logs down muddy roads. The areas where these roads existed became known as skid rows, cheap districts where temporary workers would stay between jobs. Los Angeles developed its own version when railroad workers needed affordable housing near the train yards. It was a practical solution to a practical problem. Workers needed cheap places to sleep near where they worked. By the 1930s and 40s, the Great Depression and returning World War II veterans created the first major concentration of people in the area. But it was still functioning. There were single-room occupancy hotels, SROs, 15,000 rooms, renting for $3 a night. These weren't luxury accommodations. They were 8 by 10-foot rooms with a bed, maybe a sink, shared bathrooms down the hall, but it was shelter. It was affordable. It worked. The neighborhood had an economy. Day labor offices where you could get hired for construction or loading work. Cheap restaurants serving 50-cent meals. Bars, pawn shops, secondhand clothing stores. It was poor, absolutely, but it had structure. People worked odd jobs, stayed in cheap hotels, saved money, moved on when they found better opportunities. The system wasn't perfect, but it functioned as a safety net for the working poor. Then came 1975. The Los Angeles Police Department officially adopted what they called the containment policy. Let me be very clear about what this was. A deliberate strategy to concentrate homeless people in one specific area of downtown. The stated reason was to protect commercial and tourist zones. If homeless people gathered in Beverly Hills or Santa Monica, that hurt business. So create one zone where being homeless was tolerated as long as you stayed within the boundaries. Keep them contained, out of sight, out of mind. The policy was never officially written down as let's create a ghetto, but that's exactly what it was. Police would pick up homeless people from other parts of the city and drop them in Skid Row. Social services directed people there. It became an unofficial dumping ground. And once that concentration started, it became self-reinforcing. Services located there because that's where the people were. More people came because that's where the services were. Around the same time, President Reagan was closing state psychiatric hospitals across California. In 1967, California had over 37,000 psychiatric hospital beds. By the mid-80s, that number had dropped below 7,000. Deinstitutionalization was supposed to be paired with community mental health centers. Those centers were never funded. Thousands of people with serious mental illness, people who had been institutionalized for years, were discharged with nowhere to go and no treatment plan. Many ended up in Skid Row because it was the one place police wouldn't immediately arrest them for existing in public. The mentally ill population in Skid Row exploded. People who needed medication, therapy, and structure support were instead living in tents on sidewalks. The population went from 5,000 people in 1975 to 18,000 by 1990, and the character of the area completely changed. It stopped being a place for the working poor and became a concentration of people with severe disabilities, addiction, and mental illness. Then came 1986 and the crack epidemic. Cocaine, specifically crack cocaine, flooded American cities. Skid Row became an open-air drug market. You could buy drugs on literally every corner. Violence exploded. The functional economy that had existed for working poor people collapsed into addiction and survival. Gangs moved in to control the drug trade. Shootings became common. The police response was minimal because of the containment policy, remember? As long as the violence stayed within Skid Row, it was tolerated. Simultaneously, developers started eyeing downtown Los Angeles for revitalization. The arts district, lofts, galleries, expensive restaurants. Young professionals wanted urban living, but they needed the land. So 75% of those SRO hotels, the 15,000 affordable rooms, were demolished, torn down to make space for luxury developments. The people living in them received no relocation assistance, no replacement housing. They had nowhere to go except the streets. This is the part that people miss when they talk about personal responsibility. The homelessness crisis didn't happen because people suddenly started making bad decisions. It happened because the affordable housing that existed was systematically destroyed without replacement. You can't house 15,000 people in SROs, destroy those SROs, and then act surprised when 15,000 more people are on the streets. By 2000, gentrification had completely surrounded Skid Row. The Arts District became trendy. Downtown lofts sold for millions. Whole Foods opened. Artisanal coffee shops. And Skid Row remained a 50-block zone of concentrated poverty, literally adjacent to wealth. The contrast became even more stark because now you had young tech workers stepping over homeless people on their way to brunch. Then came fentanyl. Around 2015, fentanyl started replacing heroin on the streets. It's 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. 2 milligrams, the size of 3 grains of salt, can kill you. It's cheaper to produce than heroin, more profitable to sell, and exponentially more addictive. Heroin addiction was devastating, but fentanyl created instant, deadly dependency. You can't taper off fentanyl the way you might with other drugs. The withdrawal can literally kill you. Overdose deaths in Skid Row increased 400% in 5 years. Walk through Skid Row on any given day, and you'll see people passed out, not sleeping, but overdosed, slowly dying until someone gives them Narcan. Narcan, the overdose reversal drug, is everywhere. Nonprofits hand it out for free. Some people get revived multiple times per week. COVID-19 hit in 2020. Skid Row, with people living inches apart in tents, saw massive outbreaks. There was nowhere to isolate, no way to social distance when you're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers. The virus ripped through the encampments. Hospitals were overwhelmed with Skid Row patients. The death toll was never accurately counted because many people died in tents and weren't found for days. By 2025, the population reached 78,000 and counting. Los Angeles has spent over $1 billion on homelessness. The population increased 42%. For every housing unit built, 5 more people lost their homes. The math isn't working. The crisis is accelerating. And here's the thing you need to understand. This didn't happen by accident. Every step of this, from the containment policy to destroying affordable housing to allowing fentanyl to flood the streets, these were policy choices. Decisions made by people with power. Skid Row is the result of 50 years of intentional neglect disguised as urban planning. 5 in the morning. That's when the day starts in Skid Row, whether you want it to or not. The city sends cleaning crews through the streets, usually around 4:45 a.m. They wake everyone up, tell them to move their tents. There's a municipal code, section 41.18, that says tents and personal property can't obstruct the sidewalk between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. So every single morning, 78,000 people pack up everything they own into shopping carts and bags, move it to the side, wait for the street sweepers to pass, then set it all back up again. The process takes about an hour if you're efficient. If you're sick, elderly, or impaired, it can take 2 hours. And if you don't move fast enough, the sanitation workers will throw your stuff in the garbage truck. They're not supposed to, but it happens. People lose tents, sleeping bags, identification, medication, everything, because they couldn't pack fast enough. The line for portable toilets starts forming around 5:30. The city provides portable bathrooms, but the ratio is absurd. 1 toilet for every 250 people. Do the math on that. 78,000 people, 312 toilets. If everyone needed to use the bathroom once per day, each toilet would need to service 250 people. Obviously, people need to go more than once. So the lines are endless, starting before dawn and continuing all day. Some people just give up and use alleys, doorways, anywhere they can find. That's part of why disease spreads so fast here. Hepatitis A, which spreads through fecal contamination, becomes inevitable when there's inadequate sanitation. The city knows this. Public health officials have written reports. Nothing changes. By 7 a.m., the day centers open. Places like the Weingart Center or the Downtown Women's Center, indoor spaces where people can sit, use bathrooms, maybe get a cup of coffee. Total capacity across all day centers, about 2,000 people. Demand, over 78,000. Most don't get in. They spend the day on the sidewalk, sitting on cardboard, trying to find shade when it's hot, trying to stay dry when it rains. Breakfast happens at the missions. Union Rescue Mission, Los Angeles Mission, Midnight Mission. They serve meals, hundreds of meals, but there's a catch. You have to attend a religious service first. It's called a spiritual requirement. Want breakfast? Sit through a sermon. Some people are fine with that. They're religious or they don't mind. Others find it degrading, being forced to perform religious participation for food. But hunger wins. So they sit through the service, say amen, get their meal. By 9 a.m., people start working. And yeah, people in Skid Row work. The idea that everyone there is lazy or doesn't want to work is complete nonsense. They collect cans and bottles. California pays 5 cents per container through the recycling program. To make $20 enough to buy food for the day, you need 400 containers. That means pushing a shopping cart for 8 to 10 hours, digging through trash bins, competing with hundreds of others doing the same thing. There's an entire economy around this. Certain blocks are known for better trash, areas near restaurants or office buildings. People establish routes, relationships with businesses that save recyclables for them. It's work. Exhausting, degrading work that pays less than minimum wage, but it's work. This is what people call the shopping cart economy. Everything you own has to be portable because you have nowhere to store it. You can't have furniture, you can't accumulate possessions. Your entire life fits in a cart that you push everywhere, that you sleep next to, that you guard constantly, because if someone steals it, you've lost everything. Your ID, your clothes, your blanket, your food, gone. Summer in Los Angeles, temperatures hit 95, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Skid Row has almost no trees, no parks, no shade. The buildings are concrete and asphalt that absorb and radiate heat. People sit against buildings trying to find any relief. Dehydration is constant. Heat stroke is common. There are water stations, but not nearly enough. People pass out from the heat regularly. There are 3 mobile medical clinics serving 78,000 people. 3 vans with volunteer doctors and nurses driving around offering basic care. They can treat minor infections, hand out antibiotics, check blood pressure, but anything serious requires going to the emergency room, which most people avoid because hospital bills for uninsured patients can reach thousands of dollars. So treatable conditions become life-threatening. Then there's the reality of addiction. Fentanyl withdrawal can kill you. It's not like alcohol or heroin where withdrawal is just painful. Fentanyl withdrawal is medically dangerous. Severe dehydration, seizures, cardiac arrest. So people aren't just using to get high, they're using to not die. That means finding money, finding a dealer, using, then starting the cycle again every 4 to 6 hours. The dealers operate openly. Certain corners are known for certain drugs. Narcotics officers know exactly where dealing happens. But enforcement is complicated because arresting low-level dealers doesn't stop the supply. It just creates a vacancy that gets filled immediately. So police focus on violent crime, which means the drug trade operates with minimal interference. By 3 p.m., people start lining up for dinner and shelter. The shelters use a lottery system. They have maybe 3,000 beds total for 78,000 people. Union Rescue Mission has 1,000 beds. Los Angeles Mission has 350. Midnight Mission has 200. Combined, all the shelters together can house about 4% of Skid Row's population. People get a ticket, wait for their number to be called. Most numbers don't get called. When yours isn't called, you find your spot on the street. In Skid Row, people establish territories. This is an actual system. Long-term residents have spots they've claimed for months or years. New people have to negotiate, find unclaimed space, or risk conflict. After 9 p.m., the streets get dangerous. Robberies between residents. Not tourists getting robbed, but homeless people robbing other homeless people. Someone gets their disability check, word spreads, they get jumped that night. Sexual assaults increase after dark. Women travel in groups when possible. Beatings over territorial disputes, over debts, over nothing. Police patrol every 2 hours or so, but they don't intervene unless there's a body. The unofficial policy is still containment, remember? As long as the violence stays within Skid Row's boundaries, it's tolerated. Officers will drive through, shine lights, keep moving. Arrest rates for crimes in Skid Row are significantly lower than the rest of LA because the justice system is already overwhelmed. Between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., this is when people die. Overdoses, mostly. Someone takes what they think is their normal dose, but this batch is stronger, and they're dead. Hypothermia, when winter temperatures drop to 40 degrees and you don't have adequate blankets. Assaults that turn fatal. Medical emergencies with no one to call for help. The sounds are constant. Sirens, always sirens. Screaming, sometimes from nightmares, sometimes from actual violence. Metal shopping carts, scraping pavement as people move through the darkness. Generators running to power phones or lights. Coughing, endless coughing from chronic respiratory infections. And then 5 a.m. comes again. The cleaning crews return. The cycle restarts. Pack up your tent, move your stuff, wait for the sweepers, set everything back up. Every single day, 365 days a year, for 78,000 people. This is life in Skid Row. Here's what people love to say. They chose to be there. They made bad decisions. They're lazy. They're addicts who don't want help. Let me destroy that myth with one fact. 50% of people in Skid Row arrived there with active employment. Half, they had jobs. They were working. And they still ended up on the streets. Want to know why? Math. Pure, simple, brutal mathematics. California's minimum wage is $16 per hour. Work 40 hours a week. That's $640 weekly. $2,773 monthly before taxes. After taxes, you're looking at maybe $2,300 take home. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles is $2,400 per month. That's more than your entire take-home pay from a full-time minimum wage job. You literally cannot afford rent and also eat. It's mathematically impossible. And that's assuming you can find an apartment for the average price, which in reality requires first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. So you need $7,200 cash just to move in. One medical emergency, one car breakdown that costs $800 to fix, one missed paycheck because you got sick and don't have paid leave, that's all it takes. Suddenly you're choosing between rent and food. Then you're behind on rent. Then you're evicted. And once you're on the street, getting back is nearly impossible. Here's the trap, the catch-22 that people don't understand. To get housing, you need identification, credit history, rental references, and no criminal record. But to get identification, you need a permanent address. To get credit, you need a bank account, which requires identification and an address. To get references, you need prior landlords who will vouch for you. But if you've been homeless, you don't have that. See the problem? You can't get out without the things you lost by being there in the first place. It's a closed loop designed to keep people trapped. And that criminal record part? 80% of Skid Row residents have arrests. For what? Crimes of survival, sleeping in public, sitting on the sidewalk, loitering, public urination when there aren't enough bathrooms. Being homeless is effectively illegal in America. You get arrested, now you have a record, now you can't pass background checks, now you're permanently locked out of 90% of rental housing. Some people have multiple arrests for the same thing, sleeping outside, because they have nowhere else to sleep. Each arrest makes getting housing harder. It's a spiral that only goes down. Los Angeles spends over $1 billion annually on homelessness. Where does it go? That's the question that should keep people awake at night. Audits from 2023 by the city controller found that only 60% of funding reaches actual services. 40% disappears into administrative costs, overhead, salaries for nonprofit executives, consultants, bureaucracy. Here's a specific example. The Proposition HHH bond, passed in 2016, allocated $1.2 billion to build 10,000 units of supportive housing. As of 2025, 9 years later, fewer than 1,600 units have been completed. That's 16% of the goal. Where did the rest of the money go? Administrative costs, environmental reviews, permits, delays. And the units that were built cost an average of $700,000 each. $700,000 for one unit of housing. The national average for similar construction is $200,000. Why is LA's cost 3.5 times higher? Regulations, union requirements that mandate specific wage rates, environmental impact studies that take years, community opposition, NIMBYism that files lawsuits delaying projects, building codes that require expensive materials, permits that cost tens of thousands just to file. The bureaucracy makes it financially impossible to build housing at scale. And here's the incentive problem nobody wants to talk about. Homelessness has become an industry. $5 to $7 billion flows annually through California's homeless services sector. 50,000 jobs depend directly or indirectly on this crisis existing. Nonprofits, government agencies, administrators, caseworkers, social workers, police, emergency medical staff, hospital workers. I'm not saying these people want homelessness to continue. Many are genuinely trying to help. But structurally, systematically, solving the problem eliminates the funding and the jobs. That's a perverse incentive built into the system. Organizations need to show they're serving people to get renewed funding. But if they actually solve the problem, they'd lose funding. So there's an unconscious drive toward maintaining the status quo. Then there's the development angle that people don't discuss. Skid Row keeps property values artificially low in surrounding areas, which makes gentrification more profitable. Developers can buy cheap in areas adjacent to Skid Row, build luxury housing, and sell high because the contrast makes their developments look premium. Every luxury building built near Skid Row increases pressure on the area while simultaneously benefiting from its existence. And fentanyl changed everything. Before 2015, heroin was the drug of choice in Skid Row. Heroin addiction is terrible, absolutely, but it's relatively manageable. You can function somewhat on heroin. Hold a conversation, do day labor, maintain some structure in your life. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. 2 milligrams kill you. That's the size of 3 grains of salt. The addiction is instant and all-consuming. One use can create physical dependency. The high lasts 30 minutes to an hour, then you need more or withdrawal starts. People become completely dysfunctional, unable to think about anything except the next dose. Trunk, which is xylazine, an animal tranquilizer mixed with fentanyl, creates what people call zombification. Users stand frozen for hours, completely catatonic, bent over at impossible angles. The drug causes wounds that don't heal, necrotic tissue that requires amputation, infections spread. It's destroyed any possibility of functional addiction. Overdose deaths increased 400% in 5 years. Narcan, the reversal drug, is everywhere. Nonprofits hand it out. People carry it. But Narcan only works if someone finds you in time and administers it correctly. Many people die alone in tents, not discovered for days. So when people ask why $1 billion doesn't fix Skid Row, this is why. The money doesn't reach the people who need it, because 40% evaporates into bureaucracy. Building housing costs 3 times the national average because of regulations and NIMBYism. There are structural incentives to maintain the problem rather than solve it. The drug crisis, specifically fentanyl, has made the population harder to help than ever before, and the poverty trap is designed to keep people homeless once they become homeless. None of this is accident. It's not unfortunate circumstances. It's design. Systems designed to contain, manage, and profit from poverty rather than eliminate it. Yes, and we know it works because other places have done it. Let's start with Houston, Texas. This is important because Houston is about as politically different from Los Angeles as you can get. Conservative city, red state, very different politics. And yet they've dramatically reduced homelessness while LA's crisis has exploded. In 2011, Houston had 8,500 people experiencing homelessness. By 2023, that number dropped to 3,200. That's a 62% reduction in 12 years. During that same period, LA's homeless population increased by over 300%. What did Houston do differently? Housing first. The model is radically simple. Give people housing immediately, no conditions. Don't make them get sober first. Don't make them prove they deserve it. Don't require them to jump through hoops or complete programs. Just house them, roof over their head, then provide support services, addiction treatment if they want it, mental health care, job training, life skills. But the foundation is stable housing. The logic is straightforward. It's nearly impossible to address addiction, mental illness, or unemployment when you're sleeping on the street. How do you get clean when you're surrounded by drugs? How do you take psychiatric medication when you have nowhere to store it? How do you show up for job interviews when you haven't showered in a week? Housing First removes those barriers. Houston also did something LA refuses to do. unified leadership. They created The Way Home, one coordinating agency with actual authority over 100 different organizations, nonprofits, government agencies, service providers, no bureaucratic fragmentation, no turf wars between nonprofits competing for funding. One strategic plan executed coherently by all partners. The results speak for themselves. The cost-benefit math is clear. Houston invested $40 million in Housing First programs. They saved $60 million in reduced emergency room visits, jail costs, and police responses. Housing people is cheaper than leaving them on the streets, significantly cheaper. Emergency room visits for untreated chronic conditions cost thousands per visit. Jail costs $80,000 per person per year. Permanent supportive housing with services costs about $20,000 annually. Now, let's look at Helsinki, Finland. In the 1980s, Finland had a homelessness crisis proportional to what LA faces now relative to population size. Thousands of people living on the streets, in shelters, in temporary housing. By 2023, they'd virtually eliminated street homelessness. Fewer than 50 people sleep on Helsinki's streets on any given night. 50. How? The Y Foundation, a nonprofit housing organization, implemented a massive Housing First program starting in 2007. They bought buildings, renovated them, converted them into supportive housing, and rented them at subsidized rates. The rent is 30% of income, whatever that income is. If you have zero income, you pay zero rent until you find work. They invented Housing First as a model. It was developed in Finland, proven effective there, then exported worldwide. 90% of people housed through Finland's program remain stably housed after 5 years. The model works. It's been replicated successfully in dozens of countries: Canada, France, Scotland, Austria, everywhere. It's implemented seriously, it works. Everywhere except, apparently, the United States. So what would it take in LA? Let's do the math. 78,000 people currently on the streets. Add another 72,000 who are precariously housed, one paycheck from homelessness. You need 150,000 housing units built in 5 years to make a real dent. Is that possible? Absolutely. During World War II, the US built 16 million housing units in 4 years for war workers and returning soldiers. The country constructed entire cities from scratch. We have the industrial capacity, the construction knowledge, the materials. We lack the political will. The investment needed is $3 to $5 billion over 5 years. That sounds massive until you remember LA already spends over $1 billion annually with negative results. Spending $3 to $5 billion to actually solve the problem would save money long term by reducing emergency services, healthcare costs, and incarceration. The model needs to be mixed, not one size fits all. Permanent supportive housing for people with severe disabilities, chronic health conditions, serious mental illness. These are people who need ongoing support services integrated into their housing. Transitional housing for people getting back on their feet, who need temporary assistance but can achieve independence. Rapid rehousing with short-term rental subsidies for people who just need help with first month, last month deposit, plus integrated services all on site. Mental health care, addiction treatment, that's voluntary, not mandatory. Job training, life skills, case management. The housing is permanent, the services are available, but participation is voluntary. That's key. Force doesn't work, support does. Legal reform is essential. The regulations that make housing costs $700,000 per unit need to be eliminated. Streamline permitting so projects don't take 5 years to approve. Reduce environmental review requirements for supportive housing. Override local zoning that prevents construction. Make it financially viable to build at scale. And here's the hard part politically. It requires one coordinating authority with actual executive power. Not 20 different agencies competing for funding and credit. Not nonprofits protecting their turf. One leader, one agency, one plan with clear goals, timelines, and accountability. Houston proved this works. The fragmented approach has failed for decades. But let's be realistic about the future, because hope without honesty is just delusion. There are 3 scenarios for Skid Row by 20, 35 years from now. Scenario A, continuity. Everything stays the same. We keep spending billions on ineffective programs. The population keeps growing 8 to 10% annually. By 2030, 150,000 people live on LA streets. Encampments expand into previously unaffected neighborhoods, Venice, Hollywood, Silver Lake. Tent cities become normalized, permanent features of the urban landscape. Costs explode to $10 billion annually just for emergency services, healthcare, and law enforcement. Diseases that were eliminated return as endemic: typhus, tuberculosis, cholera potentially. Tourism declines as conventions and visitors avoid LA, costing $500 million plus in lost revenue. The crisis becomes the defining characteristic of Los Angeles, overshadowing everything else. Scenario B, total criminalization. The Supreme Court ruling in 2024, Grants Pass v. Johnson, allowed cities to arrest people for sleeping in public even when shelter space doesn't exist. LA goes full enforcement, mass arrests, strict anti-camping laws, aggressive sweeps pushing people out of downtown. Where do they go? Anywhere, everywhere. Neighboring cities, surrounding counties, the riverbed, the desert. The problem disperses but doesn't disappear. And the cost is astronomical. $80,000 per year per person to incarcerate versus $20,000 for housing and services. Plus, anyone arrested gets a permanent criminal record, making reintegration into society effectively impossible. It's a cycle that only creates more homelessness. Scenario C, actual solution. This requires political will we haven't seen yet, but remains possible. Housing First implemented at massive scale. 150,000 units in 5 years. Prevention through real rent control and strong tenant protections so people don't become homeless in the first place. Coordinated services with one authority managing everything. Legal reform eliminating barriers to construction. This scenario requires elected officials to prioritize solving homelessness over appeasing homeowners who oppose construction. It requires spending money upfront to save money long term. It requires looking at what worked in Houston and Helsinki and swallowing pride to copy it. The evidence exists. The blueprint exists. What's missing is courage. Here's why you should care, even if you don't live in LA, even if you've never been to Skid Row, even if you think this doesn't affect you. You're closer to homelessness than you think. Studies show most Americans are 2 or 3 crises away from losing housing. Medical emergency with inadequate insurance, job loss during an economic downturn, divorce, car accident, serious illness. That's it. That's all it takes. The systems that failed people in Skid Row exist everywhere. Unaffordable housing, inadequate healthcare, lack of mental health services, addiction treatment that costs thousands out of pocket, wages that haven't kept pace with cost of living. These aren't LA problems. They're American problems. Skid Row is just where those failures are most visible. Skid Row measures our collective moral failure as a society. 5 people die there daily, 1,825 per year. That's more casualties than most wars. And we have the resources to stop it. The wealth exists, the knowledge exists, the solutions exist and have been proven effective elsewhere. We choose not to implement them. That choice says something profound about who we are as a society, what we value, who we consider worthy of help. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Because doing nothing is a choice. Accepting the status quo is a choice. Allowing this to continue is a choice. And every day we make that choice, 5 more people die in the richest city, in one of the richest countries in human history. That should be unacceptable. The fact that it isn't tells you everything you need to know.